Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Mindset Motivation Money Podcast. It's awesome to have you here again. You know you're in for some super uplifting conversation every time you tune in. Today we're going to be tackling something really interesting. We're going to be looking at the idea of self as maybe a bit of an illusion.
Ooh, that is a fascinating concept.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. So are you ready to kind of have your mind bent a little bit today?
Always up for a good mind bending. You know, this idea that you think you are like this single unified self might actually be kind of a trick that our brains are playing on us.
Okay, hold on. A trick.
Yeah.
So you're saying that the way I experience my thoughts, my feelings, it's not the full picture.
Well, think of it like this. Your brain is this master storyteller, right? It takes all of your experiences, your thoughts, your memories, and weaves them into this cohesive narrative that we call self. And this ego trick, as it's often called, is actually super helpful. Can you imagine trying to get through the day without a sense of you making decisions and interacting with the world?
Right, it would be chaos.
Total chaos.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. So this ego trick helps us function. But what's the downside? What is it that we need to be aware of?
It's like any good story. We can get a little too attached to the narrative, right? We start to believe that this self that we've constructed is fixed and unchanging. And that can lead us to resist change, avoid new experiences, and get stuck in limiting self-beliefs.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's like we've written ourselves into a specific role in the story of our lives, and we're afraid to improvise or try something new.
Exactly. And that's why understanding this ego trick can be so liberating. When we realize that this sense of self is a construction, it's not an absolute truth, we open up this possibility for change, growth, and transformation.
So how do we start to see through this illusion? Like, what are some of the first steps to recognizing the ego trick in action?
Well, one powerful tool is becoming aware of our inner conversations, that constant chatter in our heads that's shaping how we experience the world.
Oh, you mean that voice that never seems to shut up? The one that's always commenting on everything I do, judging my every move?
That's the one. We all have it. And it plays a huge role in creating this illusion of a unified self. It's constantly weaving together a narrative, trying to make sense of everything we experience and give us that sense of continuity.
So if we want to understand the ego trick, we need to start paying attention to this inner dialogue. But isn't that, like, really hard? Our minds are always racing.
It can feel really overwhelming at first, but with practice, you can start to notice the patterns in your thinking. Start paying attention to how your inner voice interprets events, judges you, and predicts the future. You might be surprised by what you discover.
You know, I'm already noticing how much my inner voice focuses on finding the right answers. Like, there's one perfect way to do everything. It's exhausting.
That is a really common pattern.
Yeah.
We often get so caught up in searching for the right answers, the perfect career, the ideal relationship, the ultimate life hack, that we miss out on the richness of the present moment.
Yeah, it's like we're so focused on getting to the destination that we forget to enjoy the journey.
And the irony is, there are no right answers. Life is messy, unpredictable, and full of surprises. Embracing that uncertainty, being open to different possibilities, is where the real magic happens.
That's so true. This is really making me think about how much energy I waste trying to fit myself into some predetermined mold. Like, I have to be this perfectly successful, always happy person.
That's the ego trick at work, trying to maintain that illusion of a fixed self. But what if you allowed yourself to let go of those expectations? What if you embraced the full spectrum of your being, the good, the bad, the messy, the beautiful?
That's a scary thought, but also incredibly freeing. It's like giving myself permission to be more human, more authentic.
And that's where self-awareness comes in. It's not about judging ourselves for having these thoughts and these patterns. It's about recognizing them, understanding where they come from, and choosing how we want to respond.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get this. We recognize the ego trick, we tune into our inner conversation, we practice self-awareness, but what do we actually do with that awareness? How does that translate into real-life changes?
That's where it gets really interesting, because once we start to see those patterns, we can begin to shift them. We can challenge those limiting beliefs, rewrite those old narratives, and step into a more empowered version of ourselves.
Okay, this is getting me fired up. So we're not just passively observing our thoughts, we're actively shaping them. We're creating a new story for ourselves.
Exactly. And that's where the real power lies. We have the ability to choose how we want to experience ourselves and the world around us.
All right, I'm officially hooked. We've kind of laid the groundwork, but now I'm itching to dive deeper into like the practical side of all of this. How do we actually start to shift those patterns and make those changes?
Well, one powerful way is by learning to interpret the messages our minds and bodies are sending us, but in a more mindful and intentional way. Let's explore that next. It's kind of crazy how often we misinterpret the signals that our own minds and bodies are sending us.
Oh, yeah.
We get so caught up in the stories that our inner voice is spinning that we completely miss the real message.
I am so guilty of that. Like when I'm stressed, I just crave sugary snacks.
Right.
It's like my brain is saying, here, have a donut. That'll fix everything.
Exactly. And for some people, these misinterpretations can have even bigger consequences.
Oh, for sure.
Think about like financial decisions, just like misinterpreting exhaustion as hunger. You might misinterpret anxiety as a need to spend impulsively, or fear as a reason to hold back from a smart investment.
Whoa, that's a great point. I never thought about it that way, but it makes total sense.
Right.
Our emotions can really cloud our judgment, especially when it comes to money.
Absolutely. And that's why developing this awareness of our inner landscape is so crucial, especially for our listeners, who are interested in mastering their mindset, their motivation, and money. It allows us to pause, question our impulses, and ask, is this feeling really what I think it is? Or is there something else going on beneath the surface?
So how do we start to separate the signal from the noise? How do we avoid these misinterpretations and make choices that are aligned with our true goals?
It's all about cultivating what we might call uninterpretation. It's the ability to recognize that our interpretations of the world and ourselves are just that. Interpretations. They're not absolute truths, but stories we've constructed based on our experiences and beliefs.
Uninterpretation. I love that word. It's like taking off a pair of blurry glasses and seeing the world with fresh eyes.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging that our perspective is limited, that there might be other valid ways of seeing things. It's about creating space for nuance and complexity, recognizing that the world isn't always black and white.
This makes me think about all those times when I get into arguments with people.
Uh-huh.
I get so attached to my own point of view that I completely shut down any other perspective.
We've all been there. And it's in those moments that the ego trick can really dig its heels in, insisting that our interpretation is the right one. But when we can step back and recognize that there might be other valid ways of understanding the situation, we open the door to resolution and understanding.
So uninterpretation is key to improving our relationships too. Not just our relationship with ourselves, but with the people around us.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest obstacles to both self-awareness and healthy relationships is this tendency we have to create heroes and villains in our mind.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
Like we're constantly dividing the world into good guys and bad guys, right and wrong.
Exactly. And this kind of black and white thinking can be incredibly destructive. It distorts our perception of reality, making it harder to form genuine connections and make sound decisions.
I think this hero-villain dynamic plays out a lot in the world of entrepreneurship. We put certain gurus or thought leaders up on these pedestals,
Yeah,
and then we demonize others who might have a different approach.
that's a brilliant observation, and it can prevent us from learning and growing. When we're so busy labeling people as good or bad, we miss out on the opportunity to learn from their unique experiences and perspectives.
So how do we break free from this hero-villain trap? How do we bring more balance to our inner conversations and our perceptions of the world?
It starts with recognizing the pattern. Notice when you're putting people or situations up on pedestals, or when you're casting others as the villains in your story. And then just start to question those judgments. Ask yourself, is this person really all good or all bad? What might their motivations be? Is there more to this situation than I'm seeing?
So it's like we're training ourselves to become more curious, more compassionate, and less judgmental.
Exactly. And as we do that, we start to cultivate a deeper sense of inner balance. And you know what? As we find that inner balance, we also tap into a wellspring of self-support.
Oh, self-support. That sounds powerful. Can you tell us more about what you mean by that?
Self-support is about recognizing that you have all the resources you need within yourself to navigate life's challenges and create a fulfilling life.
Okay.
It's about trusting your inner wisdom and relying less on external validation.
But we all need support from others,
Yeah,
right? We can't do everything alone.
of course. But what's fascinating is that external support often works by triggering positive emotions and beliefs that already exist within us.
So you're saying that when someone offers us support, they're not actually giving us anything new.
Right.
They're just activating something that's already there.
Think of it like this. Imagine someone gives you a compliment that just really boosts your confidence. That compliment resonates with you because it aligns with a part of you that already believes in your worth, even if it was hidden beneath, layers of self-doubt.
Wow, that's a powerful image. So it's not that we need other people to, like, give us confidence or strength. We already have those qualities within us. We just need to learn how to access them.
That's the heart of it. And a big part of that is understanding our triggers. Those things that activate our positive and negative emotions. When you can recognize your triggers, you can consciously choose which ones you want to activate and which ones you want to avoid.
This is making me think about how much I rely on external validation.
Hmm.
Likes on social media, praise from my boss, approval from my friends. It's like I'm constantly seeking approval from outside sources instead of looking within.
That's a really common pattern, and it can be incredibly draining. But as you cultivate self-support, you start to realize that you don't need that constant external validation. You can find a sense of peace and fulfillment from within.
This is all so incredibly empowering. It's like we're taking back control of our own emotional states
Hmm.
and creating a more supportive inner environment. But as we're talking about all this, I'm wondering, how does self-definition fit into all of this? We all have ways of defining ourselves, right? We think of ourselves as certain kinds of people with certain traits and characteristics. How does that play into the picture?
That's a great question, and it's something we need to approach carefully. Because self-definition, while seemingly harmless, can sometimes become a trap that hinders our growth and self-awareness.
Okay, so we're going to dive into this world of self-definition now.
Yeah.
This should be interesting. We all have these labels that we put on ourselves, right? I'm an introvert, I'm creative, I'm good with money, but you're saying those things can actually hold us back.
It's not that those labels are inherently bad. I mean, sometimes they can be helpful, like shorthand for understanding ourselves and communicating with others. But the problem arises when we cling to those labels too tightly, when they
Yeah.
become these rigid boxes that limit our potential.
Ah, I see what you mean. So it's like when we define ourselves as not good at math, we might avoid taking on challenges that could actually help us develop those skills.
Right.
We basically write ourselves off before we even try.
Exactly. And this is where the ego trick can really rear its head. It
Yeah.
wants to maintain that sense of consistency, that illusion of a solid, unchanging self. So it clings to those self-definitions even when they're outdated or no longer serving us.
So if we shouldn't define ourselves so rigidly, how do we make sense of who we are? How do we answer that question, who am I, without resorting to those labels?
It's a great question, and it kind of invites us to shift our perspective a little bit. Instead of thinking of ourselves as these fixed entities with static traits, what if we embraced the idea that we're constantly evolving, growing,
Ah.
becoming?
Mm.
So instead of saying, I am this, try saying, I have the capacity for this.
I love that. That's a great shift in language.
Right.
It's so much more expansive and empowering. It's like instead of closing doors, we're opening up this whole world of possibilities.
And that's where true freedom lies. When we loosen our grip on those rigid self-definitions, we open ourselves up to this world of infinite potential. We give ourselves permission to grow, to change, to surprise ourselves.
This reminds me of something we were talking about earlier, the power of choice.
Yes.
Recognizing the ego trick, tuning into our inner conversations, cultivating self-awareness, it all leads to greater agency in our lives.
Absolutely. When we're caught in that illusion of the ego trick, we often feel like we're at the mercy of our thoughts, our feelings, our circumstances. But when we start to see that the self is a construction, a process rather than a finished product, we realize that we have so much more power to shape our experience than we might have believed.
It's like we're taking back the reins of our own lives. We're no longer just reacting to the things that are happening to us. We're consciously choosing how we want to show up in the world.
And that's what I find so inspiring about all of this.
Yeah.
Understanding this ego trick, it isn't about tearing down the self or becoming nihilistic. It's about embracing that fluidity, that dynamism of the self, and recognizing the power that we have to author our own stories.
This has been such a mind-blowing conversation. I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of myself and how my mind works, and I'm really excited to put all of this into practice.
Me too. And remember, this is a journey, not a destination. It's about continuous exploration, curiosity, a willingness to let go of those old stories that no longer serve us.
Awesome. Well, I think our listeners are walking away with a lot to ponder today. As we wrap up, is there one final thought, like one nugget of wisdom you'd like to leave them with?
I would encourage everyone listening to consider this.
Mm-hmm.
If the self is constantly evolving, what is it that provides that sense of continuity we all experience? What is it that makes you you from one moment to the next? It's a question worth exploring.
That is a fantastic question to ponder. And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the nature of self. We hope it sparked some new insights and inspired you to kind of embrace the power of choice in your own life. Keep exploring, keep growing, and keep rewriting your story.